Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. My guest today is Scott Parker. He's an editor and colorist in the motion picture industry and the creator of Baseball's Unlikely series, passion project, nearly 4 decades in the making. His books capture hundreds of strange, historic, funny, and unforgettable baseball moments told through the eyes of a true fan and structured like an actual game, from spring training to extra innings. Hello, Scott, and welcome to Back to Basics.
Hello, Leticia. Good to be back to basics.
I love it. I think you are my first guest that is all about baseball and is baseball specific. So I'm very excited, a little bit intimidated, but I will disclose these people that follow this know. I was born and raised in Venezuela, which is a major baseball country. So while I'm not as such a big fan as you are, I can certainly appreciate the love of the game.
Excellent.
Awesome. So let's start a little bit before we get into your book. I have it here. I will show it. I will show it several times, but basically we're gonna talk about his second book because you've written one before this, which is Baseball Unlikely, a Constant. This is game two. You were so kind to send it to me, and I love it. My husband say, "Since when you like baseball?" And I'm like, "This is the beauty of my podcast. I get exposed to all different things, and I just love it." So thank you for sending it to me.
Well, even if
So
you
I,
don't know a lot about baseball, you will enjoy the stories because even my dad, who I've read a couple stories to, says, "Wow," when I read them to him. So
yeah,
there's something in
because
there.
yeah, this is major, and this is not only that. This is not only baseball. This is life-defining moments. I mean, this is stories that really mean something because of what they mean, also in the culture. But let's go back to basics, to your origin story. So somebody that writes a book for baseball, I'm sure that you were a fanatic, a fan early on. But what were you also passionate about as a young kid? What did your parents think you were going to become, and what did you aspire to become?
Well, I think everything I saw on TV, whether it was the Indy 500 or golf or football or anything I saw on TV, that's what I wanted to do. So you as a young kid, you're just exploring the options. You really have no idea. And I didn't think baseball would become such a big part of my life. The very first game I went to was in 1973 with my brothers. My Aunt Elva took us to Anaheim Stadium, and she got us some great seats. And we didn't really understand the game. Yes, we played Little League, so we understood the game enough to know how to play, but we didn't understand the dynamics behind professional baseball. So after the game, she took us to the players' parking lot to get autographs, and I wasn't quite sure why. And I still have those autographs today, so that's kind of fun.
Mhm.
Uh, she later took us to a Dodgers game, so I've now been to an Angels game and a Dodgers game back in '73. So yes, I did get into baseball from that. As I got older, I got introduced into music. And so when I was about 13, I was actually into horror films at the time. And a friend of mine turned me on to the Kiss album Destroyer. And,
Mm.
I kind of fell in love with this one song, Detroit Rock City. And I'm like, oh, I've never even thought about music before. So I bought the record and I listened to it over and over. And I'm like, if they can do this, why can't I do this? So I went out and bought a bass to be like Gene Simmons. And I started playing bass. And I'm like, I'm such a creator. I want to write a song. And I just don't feel like I can write a song on a bass guitar. So I went and got a guitar instead. And then boom, I just started writing. And so
Mm.
from the age of 13 to God, probably my mid 20s, I had a guitar in my hand 7, 8 hours a day. I started a band, and the band ended up being named Revenge. And excuse me, and our first single came out as a picture disc, and it was called Midnight Fantasy. And we were about ready to release an EP. And what happened was there was a band in Philadelphia that ended up getting the name Revenge. So we were not able to use it, but we'd already paid for this beautiful artwork. And the
Oh
artwork was
boy.
this big medieval old castle. And so I'm looking at my bandmates and I said, there's the name of our band, Castle, because the art's already there. Castle, but
Mm.
let's spell it differently. Nobody can steal our name. So the band's name is Castle, spelled Cassle. So
Mm.
went with that for a long time, and the band got close to going on tours. We went to Geffen, and we almost got signed to a major contract. And as you know, when it comes to music, most of the bands that make it, it's all about timing, and we just didn't have the timing. So
Mm.
I decided to go a completely different direction and get rid of everybody in the band except for my keyboardist, who him and I wrote all the material. And I said, you know what we should do is we know enough musicians around town. Why don't we find our favorite singer, our favorite drummer, and our favorite bassist and have them record with us? If we get the contract, they will leave their current bands and go with Castle. So the plan ended up failing because we took a break and my keyboardist went and got married and I just never played with him again. So I kind of got, creatively lost. Yes, I could have found another keyboardist, but those were back in the days where you didn't record anything, as far as like videos or anything to here, watch this video and see if you can play the song I wrote. No, you just couldn't do it. So I was kind of lost, but I was working as a tape op in Hollywood. And I got the opportunity to go to what is known as an online edit bay. And where I was working, we did not have one of those. And I go to this bay and I'm just looking around. My God, I feel like I'm flying the Starship Enterprise in here. And so the editor for that bay, he was asking questions about what I wanted to do because he was finishing a product. My dad edited a commercial for a movie, and he was finishing making the 1-inch master for television. And he said, "What would you think of doing a wipe here? What's a wipe?" So I just no clue. So as time went on, we ended up getting an online bay at the place that I was working at. And I told my dad, I said, can I borrow money to go to school and learn this equipment you just bought? Because this is what I want to do. So I reinvented myself from a musician to an online editor. And I'm still working as an online editor, and it's been, God, close to 40 years now. I've been an online editor and I've become a colorist. And so I do mostly color grading now. That's what this everybody needs. And I work on that show Naked and Afraid. Have you heard of that one?
Yes, I have heard. I haven't watched, but I have heard about it.
Okay. Well, if you watch it, they're not naked. They're covered with blurs because we can't run the naked
Okay.
footage.
Okay. That
It's a
must be
very
interesting.
it's a very challenging show to color because the cameras are all over the world, outdoors, indoors, dark, light, diary cams for the contestants to use in their bomas, and so it's a fun challenge to color the show.
Interesting, interesting.
So
And when it's and this is from somebody that has no idea how that works. So even when it's like real video footage, you still color it? How does that?
yes, yeah, it doesn't always require a lot of color in a good situation. If you have perfect lighting on a stage, you can let it go as is. It probably doesn't need
I
color
see.
at all.
I see. So you perfect the color, whatever is coming on from capturing from the camera to what you want it to be as an end result.
Yeah, they actually call it color grading now because it's a personal grade on what you
Mhm.
think it should look like. And then you basically have to make all of the cameras balance.
Hmm.
So you balance the color so their skin tones match from cut to cut.
I love it. I love it. Well, there's something, what an interesting journey so far. And of course, we're going to get into baseball in the book. But I just love the fact that you, and I've had a few guests like you, is the minority. I am passionate about following the journeys and following where the passions of each guest took them. And it's usually the pattern I've seen in over 320 episodes. It's you're very passionate about something, but then you went and did whatever you were supposed to do in terms of career, degree, and then later in life your passion finds the way back into your life. And it's love your journey because it's almost like you were following your passion, which to me it's almost more natural into when you talk about fulfilled people and people that are really excited about what they do in life. It's like I follow music, but then you fell into Hollywood and this online editing, and you're like, I love this. Is it something that you feel that made you follow certain paths, or how would you describe? And this is just to help others that maybe they have that nudge where they say follow these but will resist.
Well, when I played in a band, I never once played a cover song from start to finish. I couldn't.
Hmm.
Not that I didn't try. There's certain licks that you just got to play because, it's like, wow, they played that really cool sounding thing. I want to at least play that. And you figure out and you play that little portion of the song. But I was always so creative that I was writing before I even tried to play anybody else's music. That's what I thought you're supposed to do. I mean, that was my goal. I had that Kiss record, and I'm like, well, I can do it if they did it. So I was just always that way. I could fall out of bed and write a song. And there's so many people that can't do that. And we're talking writing lyrics and writing music to it, not just one or the other. And so I basically
Interesting.
bounced, yeah, every idea I would bounce off my keyboardist and back and forth. So he would have his creative ideas, and then we would have writing days, and we would combine them. And once we had a song, shall we say, locked, we would introduce the drummer to it. And then they would take on a whole nother level of coordination to get the song done. And then you add the bassist to it, and then the singer. And when people say, "Do you still play guitar anymore?" I basically say no because I would sit there and want to write, not just play.
Mhm.
And so if I don't have a band to bring it to, I just feel like I'm wasting my time playing if I'm not playing for anybody.
That's so interesting. And something you said, because people obviously ask me all the time about the guitars, and it's my husband that's the musician, but he played professionally for 8 years. And he also, when he arrived in the States from the Netherlands, he was hired in a band, and basically he realized that he will be playing covers because also, as you say, timing was everything. So his time also had kind of not been in sync. And he realized I cannot spend my life playing covers and other people's creations, and he completely also left it there. And then he's an engineer, so he went and pursued his engineering career. But it's so interesting that the really creative types, they just have to do that, create rather than just play what others have put into the world. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's a wired gift.
Mhm.
I don't think you can learn creativity so much. I mean, you can learn aspects of it that obviously you can excel with, but I just feel like I was born with that creative gift, and
Yeah.
I try not to waste that.
I love it. So I will ask a question that is begging to be asked. So what's your take on this AI stuff? Because I see, and I'm not gonna go on the music track, but this is interesting because I see it. I have somebody at home that has similar uh, experience, and now he says, well, AI is unleashing all these things in terms of production and what you can do, and like he has his weaknesses, like I don't sing well and the lyrics are not his strength, but he's creating the music and the guitar. That's his improvising. That's his strength. They say, well, I find it that now with the AI, I can fill in gaps that I had before in a more easier way. So, what's your take on what's happening in terms of these tools that are now available for a musician? What's your take?
Well, it's kind of frightening. A good friend of mine, he has a close friend of his, and she was staying at his house one weekend. And so we all started talking on the phone, and she's like, "Oh, what are you into?" And I told her, "Well, I'm into heavy metal, and my wife and I met at a garlic festival, so we have a big garlic theme between us." And she goes, "Okay, let me write a song for you." I said, "You don't need to write a song for me. Don't waste your time." She goes, "No, it won't take long at all." About 20 minutes later, she sends me this song, and this song was so amazing, I would pay for it. 20 minutes AI, unbelievable.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So it's frightening in that regard. In another regard, I kind of think the just living human beings are their own form of AI because I do know that the very first song I wrote at the time, I was listening to a lot of Rush and Judas Priest. And you know what? My song sounded a lot like Rush meets Judas Priest. So I
Hmm.
think that's my own personal form of AI.
Mm.
So
I
AI
love
is going
that.
to help us in a lot of ways. Creatively, it's kind of disturbing. So how it helps the world is good, but I'm also concerned about how many jobs it's going to take away. So it's kind of
Mhm.
a frightening time.
I love that take. And definitely I totally agree with that. And I believe that it's just gonna change our jobs to something different, but it's gonna reassess everything. But in any case, at some point of this, you kept going with your passion for baseball, and life has allowed you to be there in really exciting moments. And at some point, you decided to write a book about it, Baseball Unlikely, a Constant Game One. So tell us a little bit about that process of that aha moment where you say, I want to write a book, because that's another thing I think a lot of people out there have thought about, like, I want to write a book and they never get to it. So what can you say about that whole experience?
Well, up to 2 years ago, I was guilty of exactly that. So in the early 90s, well, I used to read the box scores in the newspaper all the time as a baseball fan. And when you read the box scores, it's almost like reading a movie script. You can kind of get a feel for what happened, who did what, and you can look at the outcomes. And they would have a little story above the box score. And every once in a while, I would read this little blurb and I would shake my head like, I cannot believe this happened during the course of that game last night. It's just shocking. And I would snip it out and date it. I was a collector anyway, so I started collecting these things. And after I had, a handful of them, I was telling my assistant, um, who I was working with in Hollywood, and I said, I got this great idea for a baseball book based on this. And I handed him one of the stories, and he says, wow, what a great idea. And to become a published author, wow, how cool. So he ended up leaving the facility and working in another place and became a post producer. And he was on the TV show Hell's Kitchen. And so
Mhm.
he hired me on that show. So I was working on that for a number of years. And every couple of years, he would ask me, how's your book coming along? So I would say, well, I'm still clipping the stories. I've done a little bit of writing, but no, I'm nowhere close to having a book done. So every couple of years, he would check in. So even more years went by and he retired. He ended up writing two children's books and
Hmm.
learned how to, what the fundamentals were to write in a certain program, how to format another program, how to publish on Amazon. And so he did that. And then he wrote one other book, a fiction book about him and his best friend growing up. And when he got done with that, he calls me and says, all right, I'm bored. What's going on with your book? I said, Rusty, I don't know how I'm even going to organize this now because I have more stories than I even know what to do with. I have hundreds and hundreds of clippings. I have screenshots. I have audio recordings. I have bookmarks. I mean, they're just all over the place. And so he says, well, why don't you let me help you? I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, I know how to do all this. And so I'm like, all right, I kind of want to write it myself, but if there's only one way for it to happen, and it's a little bit of him, a little bit of me, let's do it. So I sent him everything I had, and he started doing some writing. And I said, I still can't write for another few months. I'm working on Naked and Afraid, but as soon as I get done, I'll start the writing. So we were working on a shared Google document, and so I would kind of read what he was writing, and then I started writing, and for a week he didn't write one story. And so I said, what's going on? Are you going to write anymore? He said, I had no idea. I go, what do you mean you had no idea? He goes, I had no idea that you could write like that. So I took that as a pat on the back and I said, okay, I guess the rest of this book is me. So I went back and touched up a few of his stories, made them a little bit more my flavor. And then I wrote 7 days a week on this to get that book out. And I closed the door at the end of the 2024 season. And the reason I had a deadline for myself was that Naked and Afraid was going to be coming back and occupy all my time. So if I didn't finish it, it was going to be a whole nother year again. So we put this whole book together. And along the way, he had asked me, he said, do you want to put pictures in here? And I said, I hadn't even thought about that. And I'm like, I've been writing about some ballparks that are long gone. Maybe it would be kind of cool for everybody to see what these ballparks used to look like. We'll just go to public domain, right? And I'm still writing and writing and writing. And then I'm like, oh my God, I have been to 37 major league ballparks and I had my camera at every single one but one. You know what? I think I have enough pictures to have full credibility in this book. We won't take anybody else's pictures. So
Wow.
in the book, in the first book, one, I think we used more than 300 pictures I took. I borrowed a handful of pictures of new Yankee Stadium from my friend Greg because I hadn't been there yet. And there are just so many Yankee stories in the books. I just felt like I needed to borrow some pictures, but at least they're originals. And the other tricky part of putting this book together was um, coming up with witty titles for the stories. And so I wanted them to, pay itself off, usually the end if I could, but somewhere within. So the story never gave up anything. So
Mhm.
I didn't even try to use a player's name because it would just give up too much to me. I want the whole story to be a surprise. And, I would come up with two or three working titles for each one. And you know where I came up with the best story titles? In the shower.
Well, that's I'm sure that that's not the first time we. It's amazing, right? How shower delivers so much inspiration.
Well, you can't do anything else in the shower but shower, but you can think.
I do believe that showering is one of the guilty pleasures of life. Like to me, a good shower is just such a great thing. Not to digress, but I'm not surprised because I also have very good thoughts and ideas on the shower. I love it. And that what was what I'm sure people were surprised again as not a super fan obviously, but as somebody that enjoys the game, enjoys being on the stadium. Like one of the things of any sport that I enjoy the most is being there, being in the stadium, being in the venue, like the energy you feel. It's just you cannot compare it to anything else. And so I know that a lot of these stories, you're very good at capturing that energy that you can only feel when you're present.
Yes.
Uh,
So, talking about AI, once Rusty stopped writing stories, he just pretty much became my editor. And he would tee up all the stories since he had all the newspaper clippings. Now I didn't have them. So he was just trying to get me started on each story and just kind of stack them up. And so he would run the little thought through AI. And I had to question him along the way. I'm like, where did you get this information? It's completely wrong. And he goes, oh, I ran it through AI. And I started thinking about that, going, baseball is so complicated and goes back more than 150 years that even that isn't tracked all that well. So AI obviously gave it a try, but they failed.
a bunch of hallucinations. Well, that's a good point because we have to make people aware that this is developing no body of knowledge, as I call it. So we cannot take what AI says as a at face value, which I think that that's also the opportunity with what they call the human in the loop, and we are still needed to make sure that what we're getting, is good enough. As is there any from either book one or two stories that have been like surprising to your I always fascinated about what your readers have said something in my case sometimes not at this episode of course but there's been episodes where I wonder like is this going to be interesting, is this going to be inspirational enough, and then I put it out there and I get a text or a message, it's like this is exactly what I needed today. So something that maybe I didn't think it was going to resonate, and then actually it resonated a lot. I'm sure that there's stories here that maybe that happened to you or any other experience like that.
No, these mostly are their newspaper clippings. There's a handful of stories between the two books that I left a writer's note at the bottom saying that I was at that game. So I've been at a few,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no way you can be at so many crazy games, especially since, these stories date back well over 100 years ago. So they
Yeah,
cover
yeah,
the
yeah.
body of time.
Interesting.
I was at one game I wrote about. I went to a no-hitter. Actually, Rusty and I together went to a Dodgers game to see my Angels play. and the
Mhm.
Angels threw a no-hitter and lost the game.
Mm,
So that
mm,
was a
mm,
sad
mm.
day, but that made the book. So they're all eye-popping stories, and they made the cut. And so all these newspaper clippings they had through the years, there was a number of them that I read, going, "Oh, this has happened a few more times since, so not so exciting anymore." So it really had to be a moment to start writing about it. And
Is there?
some stories that I wasn't sure I could turn into a worthy story because I don't want just an eye-popping stat. Stat is one thing, something that happened is another thing, but to have a storyline within it is really what I was looking for. And so every
Mhm,
once in a
mhm.
while, I'll come across a story and go, okay, let's research this, see what I can find. And I start looking at the box scores, the other players that played in the game, and they're now Hall of Famers. And I'm like, holy crap, this has to be in the book. Okay. Now I got my
Mhm.
angle. I've
Love
got
it.
this great in the second book that you have. I should probably back up a little bit because being creative, I don't have chapters in my books. I one morning woke up and said, let's see, what's chapter one gonna have? And I'm like, oh, you know what? Let's have a preface in the book where we start with spring training. That's the way the baseball season starts.
Mhm. I love that.
So so spring training covers all the things that you should know about the game. You know who the home run leader is. You know who had the longest hitting streak, the longest games played streak. All these things that they're no longer worthy writing about this new eye-popping stories. Those are just amazing stats that are probably never going to be broken. So that sets up baseball. And then we have pregame warm-up. And pregame warm-up talks about the technology in the game, about the first radio broadcast, the first night game with lights and how the lights got turned on, the first television game. And basically, we've never looked back. And, it gets easier and easier to get a game in your living room. So, people don't think about that. You're just so used to having a game on. You can watch it on your phone. Back in the old days, you had to listen to it on radio. It was crazy. And I still prefer the radio once in a while. Although I got a treadmill story on the radio today that was a nightmare, but that's another story. Um,
Radio
um,
is exciting. I have to admit, when I go, I'm a soccer fan, but in World Cup times or stuff like that, and I go to the AM that is broadcasting the game. It's just so exciting to listen in the radio. I don't know, maybe because of my age and like we used to listen it to that like that. Is there's something about radio listening.
yeah, absolutely. And you get used to these voices in your head.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you end up having your favorite radio announcers, and then they change, and you're gonna get upset. You got to learn somebody else's voice all over again and appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So is there thinking about when I was preparing for this interview, I say, well, I understand the game. I'm not like a lot of the stats, especially in American baseball. I did watch, and I hope it's in some of your future books when Venezuela beat the United States on the World Series. That was as a Venezuelan, that was a huge day, especially because our country has been going through so much that I gave a joy that we haven't felt in a long time. So that was something that, and we are, and Venezuela is a baseball country, so it is something that was so nice. Really a great reminder. But I was thinking about movies that I've loved that are about baseball and get us close to that love of baseball. Do you have a favorite baseball movie?
I have a passion for Bull Durham.
Okay, okay.
Major league love story in a minor league town.
Okay, I haven't watched that. I have to check it out. My favorite is a Field of Dreams, I think it is. The Kevin Costner one.
They're both Kevin Costner.
Oh, they're both. You see, and the other one I don't think I watched. I have to go check it out. But yeah, I think that's great. And A League of Your Own. Also, I have to say, it's fine. It makes a baseball part of it, but then the stories are so deep. So I was just curious about what was your favorite. So now you gave me a new recommendation.
I recently read something about Field of Dreams. They were shooting, God, I think it was a night game, and they didn't have enough fans in attendance. And so the producers of the show or the director went out and found a concert that was letting out, a Pink Floyd concert. And so they told the fans, like, hey, we're shooting a movie. Do you guys want to be fans to fill in the stands? And they're like, wow, shooting a movie, cool. So if you look closely at the crowd, almost everybody's got a Pink Floyd shirt on. I never noticed that.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out. That's so funny. Oh my God. The behind the scenes, right, of movie making, which actually is a great segue about you have worked in Hollywood for many years. Is there anything, I'm sure that a lot of people maybe are curious about that? Any nuggets of wisdom or of thoughts or reflection about working in shows and movies and the work you do besides writing good books?
You know what? That's a podcast for another day because a few of the guys that I worked with, we were recently together at a wedding, hadn't seen each other in 10, 12 years, and we sort of sat around this table just throwing nuggets out from everything and decided, you know what? Let's start recording this. And so the audio mixer who was there, he recorded a couple hours on his phone and said, "All right, we're going to turn this into a podcast."
I think
And he
there's a
since
great idea.
never called to do it, but that's how many crazy things that you could talk about. I was going downstairs to get my next client, and there's a guy at the bottom of the stairs with his back turned to me, so I couldn't get to the floor level. I'm like, "Oh, excuse me." Turns around, it's Mike Myers, Austin Powers.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah, yeah, of
there's
course.
cars running around.
And
As a matter of fact, this is a baseball related story. I was in the kitchen and this woman turns to me and says, "Do you know how to use this?" And it was Farrah Fawcett.
oh,
So,
wow.
so I go and, get her coffee hot in the microwave or whatever it was. And I saw her later and we ended up going out front and we were talking. And at the time, the World Series was getting ready to play in San Francisco. So I know it was 1989. And my assistant comes out, runs out to me, and we're on the porch talking. And he goes, "Scott, something just happened. I think it might have been an earthquake or something." And I'm like, "Huh? Well, all right. Well, we'll figure it out in a few minutes." Turned out it was a major earthquake that stopped the World Series for 5, 6, 7 days. So that was kind of interesting. So I've always got that moment I'll never forget about meeting Farrah on the
At the
day of that
same
earthquake.
time. Wow, that is
Yeah.
incredible. Well, I definitely love the idea. I think that there's stuff with the music that you were doing, plus the baseball, plus your Hollywood job. That is definitely a lot of content there for podcast, and I mean, you always have an invitation here back to basics if you want to share any of that. So I usually, as we reach the end of the interview, I love to ask about you, what keeps your heart ticking and what keeps you passionate about what you do. And obviously you're a creative soul, so you have done that well. Is there anything else that is like your practice or something you do to keep connected to what makes you tick?
No, like I said, I'm kind of wired that way. And, now that I've taken the time to write these books, which is still surreal to me, by the way, I never thought it'd be done. I
Mhm.
almost cried when the first one came out. And the reason there's a second one is yes, material happens all the time, which is why the book is called Baseball's Unlikely, a Constant, because I'm constantly finding things. So, as a matter of
Mhm.
fact, last alone, I came up with 50 new stories for the second book. So, I'm assuming if I pay attention, I should get about 50 new stories a year. So, I'm hoping to keep this to be a live book. So in the meantime, I usually have Major League Baseball Network, MLB Network on in the background while I'm working, and I keep an ear open. And when I hear something cool that might be story worthy, I stop, back it up, either record it, take a screenshot or something, and then when I get time, I write it or research it to see if it's worth writing about. So that definitely keeps me ticking. So I am writing whenever I can. It's probably the funnest part of it all.
Well, thank you for that, Scott. It's really what you just did is make it very tangible for anybody out there that has an idea, a passion, or something they want to do, and they say, "I cannot do it because I'm doing my job, I'm doing my thing." You just share how you kind of identify an earmark and put it on your radar and then make it happen later. So I think that inspires me. So thank you for that. And I'm sure it will inspire others. To all of you that love stories and history and baseball lovers for sure. This is a book. It's going to be on the Amazon link. It's going to be on the show notes. Go get it. It's really filled with great pictures and great tidbits. I think I'm actually going to gift one to my brother-in-law Tommy, who's a big fan, and he knows the stats, he knows everything that goes behind it. So I think it makes a great gift for any baseball lover too. So thank you for that, Scott. And I'm very honored that you say yes to being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I always love talking baseball, and even if I got to talk about the rest of my life, that's okay too.
Thank you so much. And to all of you, thank you for tuning in. If you like this episode, please share, review, and rate it a gift star, and go get Scott's book when you have a moment. Thank you so much for tuning in.
You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.